going on, everyone? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com, at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and I think I'm missing one more, but hey, we're here. I'm Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. I'm the be your co-host and data guru here at Occupy Fantasy, alongside with Brian Jester at Brian Jester FF on Twitter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. What's up, Brian?
What's happening, man? You and I were just talking right before we went live. We both really love this week, so yeah, I'm excited. I'm taking a little break here in between UFC lineup building. Go ahead and try to defend my crown from 2 weeks ago, and
Nice.
see if I can go back-to-back GPP wins. But if not, we got some good NFL to talk about.
Absolutely. I added a new monitor or an additional monitor to my setup this week, and it's great, absolutely fantastic. But now I have no idea where to look with like the webcam and then like all my tabs open. So if you see me looking over this way, I'm looking at my additional monitor. So looking up stats or questions for you all. So
Dude, how much does productivity skyrocket for every screen you add? It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't even think it's diminishing returns at this point. Like you can have like 30 monitors and you'll be fine.
For real though.
Brandy, thank you for the subscription. I didn't even know we had that as a thing. So thank you, Brandy. Abel says I feel confident about this slate. Yeah, I think
Yes,
Brian,
sir.
we can just jump right into it. It's written in the plug. You look at any of the models, I think it stands out. There's three very clear stacks this week.
I think so. So you and I might differ a little bit on the third one, or at least the strategy for the third stack. We might differ a little bit, but Chris obviously does a great job of identifying. We're finally on the same page as him this week, so I don't have to feel bad about fading one of the game stacks in the plug and it absolutely exploding. So we're in really good shape this week. And I think they're two close games with high totals that make a ton of sense to stack. And then, Moose, we start to get into a little bit of that area where we were talking about the first half of the season with some of the big spreads and how to handle those. And we do have a couple of those to think about too.
Yeah, so while the stacks may be easily identifiable, how to play them is the more challenging one. And Ed here says, "What's up? If I'm doing a Lamar stack, is it suboptimal to run a Lamar Hollywood with a run back instead of doing a 3-1?" That's a good question for quarterbacks that are very mobile. Brian, we found out that you don't necessarily have to go to 3-1 with mobile quarterbacks.
Nope, you can certainly 2-by-1 them, which is what Ed is alluding to here. So Lamar with one of his pass catchers, running back with a stealer, and that's totally fine because ideally you're wanting to get Lamar, the 100-yard rushing bonus or whatever it may be, and that can certainly happen. I will say the more expensive the quarterback is, generally the more pass catchers you want. Like if you have a super cheap mobile quarterback that's like 5K, that's a little bit easier to 2-1 stack. I think once you get to Lamar's range, I still lean towards 3-1 stacking. But as we've seen, Moose, 2-by-1 stacking still is good. Not huge leverage, but it's not negative leverage, right? So it's still a fine lineup construction type in all contest sizes.
Yeah, as long as you're not doing anything that's negative leverage, that's good.
Yep.
I like stacking with Hollywood. Don't do like Bateman or like a running back or something like that. So
Right.
it digs into it. So, Brian, we can just jump right into the first stack that was written in the plug, and if I can figure out which tab I'm actually broadcasting, we can scroll down here, and it was exciting to me to see Cincinnati as the first stack. Wasn't my first stack, but was one of my top three with a high 50-point total. The Chargers and Bengals have an extremely high ceiling as a game stack opportunity. The Bengals are slight home favorites. Feature Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon as primary weapons with upside. And Chargers pass the second highest rated in the NFL and have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler at their disposal. So a bunch of weapons from across the board for both teams. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. So a couple things going in its favor. Obviously, it has the high game total. We have two teams playing outside of their division, which is always a slight bump when we get this late in the season, right? Once we get those second divisional matchups, we start to see fantasy scoring drop a little bit. But this game in particular, the biggest question for me, Moose, is, and I'm looking here. So again, totals 50 points. We like that. The biggest thing is, can we get some variance in the touchdowns through the passing game? Obviously, the Bengals have been run heavy near the goal line. And the Chargers allow teams to run the ball against them. So that's the one way this stack fails, is if both teams end up running, the Chargers do some Charger shit where they don't let Herbert cook. So I could see it failing, but like Chris points out in the plug here, there's so much upside on both sides that you have to like stacking this game. And again, it's a high risk option, but that's what we're here for.
Yeah, you and I were just talking about it right before, and I was pointing out that Joe Mixon actually leads the league in percent of team rushes that are inside the 5 yard line. 91% of the team rushes within the 5 yard line are to Joe Mixon. He's got 6 touchdowns on 10 attempts inside the 5, and is I think in second across the league in attempts. So if we can get that variance to draw back just a little bit, or don't get tackled at the 1 on a long deep ball and just actually score, that would be even better.
Yeah, that's another option, right? Just don't even get inside the 5. Just all the touchdowns come from outside the 20, which I mean, with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, that can certainly happen. So, to me, there's a couple different ways to play it, and as we have the Curtis Samuel theory that we talk about in the strategy guide, we talk about here every week. I think you can loosen up those rules a bit on weeks like this, Moose, where we have super cheap running backs, and I'm sure we'll talk about Sonny Michel here in a little bit. But when you have super cheap options outside the stack, and you don't necessarily have to force in a cheap option, which means, right, you can play Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, running back with Keenan Allen, which generally is too expensive to make work. But with all the cheap running back options we have this week, it can certainly be done. And I don't think you have to limit yourself in the type of 3-1 stacks that you make.
Absolutely, yeah. Now I do want to ask you one other quick question. This may sound wild from. Let's say you're not game stacking this. You're not 3-1 game, 2-1, whatever. You want to use it as a secondary stack. We talked about how the stack could fail because they're running the ball like crazy. Could you see like an Eckler Mixon mini stack, 1-1 mini stack being in a winning lineup this week?
Absolutely, because for one, it's going to be different than what I think most people will do, right? Most people are either going to pay all the way up for Madison and Jonathan Taylor, and or play the cheaper running backs. So you automatically get that kind of bit of a differentiation. But yeah, if Mixon gets 2 touchdowns like he has for freaking 4 straight weeks, Eckler we know can play in all game scripts. If they're trailing up, he's going to get the ball whether through the air or on the ground. So yeah, I mean, I could easily see that happen, and I think that's a decent option if you're not fully stacking this game.
Definitely. Got some questions here in the chat. One from Ed says, "Talk me up in Guan Yu as my 3-man Minnesota Curtis Samuel."
He might get like 5 touches. Don't do it.
Any love for Ram stacks?
Great question. So Moose, I think this is where we might differ a bit and let's talk about that for game stacks, right? So we have the Chargers in Cincinnati. I assume, Moose, your other game that you really like is Washington and the Raiders, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a little bit here. We both really like that game. And then for me, I'm going to split my third game stack. Again, we like to play 6 quarterbacks in our tournament lineups. I'm going to just play the one side of Tampa, right? I think Atlanta's a 10-point dog. We've seen them they have a like minus 100-point differential, right? They hang with with bad teams, and they just get absolutely destroyed by good teams. Yeah. I don't think there's any reason to 3-man stack or stack Atlanta with Matt Ryan at all. So just play the Tampa Bay side. And we know from our research that double-digit spreads, generally you don't want to stack the underdog, and you don't even have to bring someone back. So we can 3-0 stack Tampa. And then to me, in that same exact vein, we get the Rams stacks. Rams are 13-point favorites, highest team total on the board against the Jags. I think for your 6 stack or whatever, however you're ranking these, include Matthew Stafford passing stacks. And you don't even have to run back a Jag because they are such big favorites.
It's funny you talk about that. I was looking at, I have like my own rankings that I have for game stacks. And it's like Tampa Bay's all the way up here, and then usually to justify a game stack, it's like 2 games are near the top. You have, and it's like Tampa Bay's here, and like Atlanta's like at the very bottom. They're just like don't stack them. So I'm not doing that.
Yeah, so I mean, so to answer Bet's question, yes, love Ram stacks. The big question to me is, do we include a one? Do we include a run back? All of our researchers showed that you don't have to do it. And again, I'm not thrilled to play. I know Marvin Jones is an underperforming wide receiver. I know the industry a bit is on Laquan Treadwell for some reason. LaVisca, right? There's a couple of guys you can run back, but again, I would just rather use my cheap option at the running back position, play actual good players, and we've seen in the past that 3-0 stacks are much better in double-digit spreads than 3-1 stacks.
Definitely. Joshua says Javante or Jamal.
Josh, I assume you mean season long, right? Because Javante is in the Sunday night game. That's a really good question, right? Everyone's excited for Javonte Williams to get the full workload with Melvin Gordon out, but they're still 10-point underdogs, so that's kind of tricky to me. I guess you have to go Javonte, but I mean, I really like Jamal's outlook this week without DeAndre Swift, and we know he's going to get used in the passing game, so I think you have to play Javonte, but I would not be surprised at all if Jamal outscores him.
Nice. Yeah, and I probably wouldn't be banking on special teams touchdowns in main slates. I think that's kind of hard to predict.
Yeah, that's a sick stack and showdown though. Little Vikings D Nguanu.
Yeah. Is Moreau essentially a lock this week with a bunch of high price stacks?
No, and I don't think so. We might as well talk about the running back position moves, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we bring up the model, or however you want to do this.
Yeah,
But
I can bring them
the
up.
fact that we have some cheap running backs that we don't have to force him anything else, right? And some of the stacks are expensive, and Moreau does provide great savings, and he's a fantastic play. The model loves him. I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to do it just because here are the guys moves that we have, right? So if we're looking at DraftKings specifically, FanDuel, similar concept. We have Jamal Williams without DeAndre Swift, who we just talked about. He's 5,400 on DraftKings. 3-down work. He ranks third in the model. Antonio Gibson without J.D. McKissick, who has taken a bunch of work away from him in the passing game. Gibson, he was purely underpriced anyways, even if McKissick was playing at 5,700 DraftKings, 6,200 FanDuel. But now he probably gets a full 3-down roll. Super cheap. I guess you could include Rex Burkhead in this mix if David Johnson sits because they've already lost Mark Ingram the trade. They've let Phillip Lindsay go. David Johnson, super questionable to play, probably doubtful, hasn't practiced all week. So Burkhead will get a ton of carries, albeit as a big underdog. But the big one that we're looking for, the situation that we have to monitor, and I feel pretty confident in what's going to happen already, is Sonny Michel in the Rams. And Darrell Henderson hasn't really practiced all week. And reading the coach's comments, they were more optimistic at the beginning of the week, and then McVay's tone changed completely on Friday, saying we have to be smart. We're going to test him out, see how it goes. At the beginning of the week, he was like, yeah, Henderson's fine. We'll play him. He'll be good. And then that tone changed. And even on Friday, he said we have to take Sonny Michel off special teams duties, which kind of indicates that he's in line for a larger workload. Yeah. So, Moose, 4,300 DraftKings, 5,300 FanDuel, 13-point favorite, largest team total, assuming Darrell Henderson sits. I mean, I know we have other cheap running backs, but none are as cheap as Michelle, and this feels like lock button territory.
I was like trying to just like say, yeah. I actually think like, because let's think about it from this point perspective. Right now, his OF index is 11.7, right? And let's say Henderson's out, his OF index will probably jump to, if I had to guess, maybe like 45 or so, because he's not bad. He's not a bad play. He's still a decent running back. To be basically $1,000 cheaper than anyone else, I will most likely lock button him in my lineups on FanDuel.
Yeah,
I think even on DraftKings I will as well. Yeah, I just don't see if Henderson is active, but they might use him for emergencies or something like that, which I don't think they'll do. Henderson would have to be like officially out for me to lock button him.
Here's the thing, right? So they play at 4:00, and we've also been pretty good, right? National reporters, local reporters have been pretty good about getting us reports about who's going to play and who's not. Sunday morning, we're pretty confident if a 4:00 guy is going to play or not.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I'll just say it straight up. I don't think Henderson's going to play, just given everything that we know. We've seen the situation a few times, not just with him, but other running backs. I don't think he's going to play. So we might even get a little bit of an ownership discount if there's no definitive word. But to me, 4,300 Michelle, lock button territory. And if you're using the lineup builder, make sure you change the max players per team setting to 2. That way you can also get Cooper Kupp in Michelle lineups. You can also get Odell or Van Jefferson, whoever. Because he's so cheap, you can definitely, with a 30-point team total, you can certainly have 2 Rams in the lineup without a quarterback.
Yeah, and Dot Bets points out here, that has to be fake news right now. But he says even bigger indication that Sony gets a huge workload. His anytime touchdown odds are minus 150 right now.
But clearly, the betting markets are preparing for him to get the start. So
yeah.
I like it. So if you consider that, right, and obviously prop markets have different limits and whatnot, but if we assume that's close to accurate, right, we get a 4,300 running back, 5,200 running back on FanDuel, who's better than 50-50 to score a touchdown. And the last time, this kind of sealed it up for me, right? The last time this happened was, I think it was week 3. Darrell Henderson sat out, and Sonny Michel was the lead back. and they didn't even try to use anyone else. Sonny Michel got 23 of the 24 running back opportunities that week. So if we get 20 opportunities, good opportunity to score a touchdown, 30-point team total. I mean, I don't care what else is out there, right? We're going to lock that type of opportunity.
Yeah, and two other things. You said you also talked about the potential ownership discount. I mean, if we can get him at 3%, like that's absolutely nutty.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah,
I don't think that will either. But if we get him at 25, 30 instead of 50, right? That still helps.
Yeah, and then what I was also going to point out is, at 4,300, again, remember, you don't need him to score 20, 30 points to win your contest. You need him to score 10. Like,
yeah.
And again, if
literally 10.
Basically, and then if his touchdown odds are, for lack of better words, like let's say like 60%, 60% chance of him getting at least 10 points.
Yeah.
Like,
so. Yeah, just do it, dude. Just do it. Yeah. And so Smokey the Cat is asking, do we play Jacobs if he's good to go, or Sonny if Henderson's out? What's the best PPR option? I assume this is a season-long question. I would still go Sonny Michel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then Dotbet says, Washington scares me to game stack with how slow they've been playing and may rely heavily on Gibson. Any worry there for stacking?
Yeah, I mean, what's the stat moves about their 3rd and 1 run-pass ratio? Something crazy, right?
Yeah, they literally have never passed the ball on 3rd and 1 the entire season. Ever.
I don't even know how that happens. Like, there's no self-scouting involved. Like, how does that even happen? So, if you want to go back to the plug moves real quick, we can talk about that game. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some concern, right? They can certainly run the ball. But, maybe that's the game. If you're only picking 4 quarterbacks to use in your 20 lineups, or you're only making a couple lineups, sure, I could see using that as a tiebreaker. But again, if you're making a bunch of lineups, you're playing large field contests, you're playing leagues. We've seen it before. Game stacks have been pretty shitty. They're not that great this week. But there are 3 clear ones that stick out, and this is one of them. So I'm going to be using that heavily. Just understand that there is downside in both the Cincinnati game and in this game for a more run-heavy, potentially slower game. But, we're playing it for the pass-catching upside.
Right. And so I'm just looking here. So what Chris wrote up, best Washington pairs with Taylor Heineke, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin. So you go Gibson. And if you want to go high risk, let's say if you do like a Heineke, Gibson, Logan Thomas stack, hopefully that they slow it down, run the ball, get a pass short, do whatever they need to do. How does that sound? Does that sound pretty terrible? Sounds pretty gross the way I'm trying to explain it, but it was just something that came into my mind.
But you're saying playing both those guys with Heineke?
Yeah.
No, I like it. Again, it's a too cheap running back who's going to. I mean, he got 7 targets last week. Yeah. 20% target share. So he's basically acting as like a slot receiver as far as like target share and average depth of target, which we would have no problem doing that with any other quarterback. So yeah, I like it, and I think you can definitely do it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so don't be scared to. Because what I was trying to say is, Gibson, McLaurin, like anyone at 3-1 stacks. Granted, it's only gonna be like 10 people that actually 3-1 stack this game, but yeah. If you want to differentiate yourself, you can go like Logan Thomas or something like that. Ed says, when looking at the model, deciding on a flex position, obviously wide receivers have a higher OF index. If Kupp is expected 11 touches at 65 plus OF index, Madison expects 36 touches at 52.6 OF index. Assuming they are approximately owned the same, what's the tiebreaker?
Sick SAT question. But yeah, so here's the thing, right? Like, receivers don't need a ton of touches because, one, their average depth of target is way higher than any running backs. Their average yards per target is way higher than any average yards per touch for a running back. Kupp has a higher ceiling just based on what we've seen so far this year. And I'm trying to go back to what I was thinking. I lost my I was trying to do the SAT problem in my head. But anyways, the receivers have the higher ceiling. Targets are weighted much more heavily in our model than rushing attempts because they lead to higher fantasy scoring. And the fact that there's an opportunity cost with all these cheap running backs, you're missing out on playing those guys if you play Madison. I think that's why we lean Kupp in that scenario.
Yeah, I would say Kupp as well, just because because I know Ed loves to play the higher risk contest. You want to go for what has the higher ceiling. And
yeah, which is why Kupp has the higher OF index.
Yeah, I was gonna say that 65 OF index is actually just Kupp's floor every week.
For real.
Chris says hair starting to flow, looking good, Moose. Yeah, it's Afro Moose. So
After I'm listening build.
I wasn't gonna cut my hair until we won Survivor, then we didn't, and then I was like, well, we still have Pick'em, so just let it grow out.
Let it grow until we win or lose pick 'em. So
Yeah,
week 18.
exactly. We're struggling in Vegas,
Yeah.
with just flowing hair. Anyway, yeah, so we're here for another 9 minutes or so. So if you have any last questions, definitely go ahead and ask them. Brian, I'll ask you about I think it was the last. Yeah, I think that was all the stacks we covered.
Did we talk about Tampa Bay briefly or no?
We did. We basically said Atlanta sucks and don't bring them back, or
Yeah.
that you're not bringing them back,
Right.
and that you're doing the Ram stack instead. Um, let's see. Dot says in high risk, fade Madison/Taylor and focus on mid price to cheap running backs.
So if you're playing 20 plus lineups, I think you still get exposure to those guys because they're number one and number two in the model, right? Like they obviously have a high ceiling, high floor. So I like them obviously. If I was to make one lineup, I would probably not play them. Play all the cheap running backs, pay up at receiver. I think that would be the way I would go. Pay up in game stacks a little bit. So yeah, so Madison number one, Taylor number two, and I mentioned this on the Roto Grinders podcast, the Yahoo podcast I do on Fridays. That Jim Saunders over at Numberfire, friend of the show, he wrote a great article. It's free on Numberfire about some of the downside risk to Madison this week. That's different than when he got the starts when Cook was out earlier in the year. So there's definitely some risk there. And to me, they jacked his price up too much, right? Remember we were playing Madison, he was like 5,500, 6K.
Yeah.
Now he's 8,700 on FanDuel. So there's certainly some downside risk there. And yeah, I'd much rather play those cheap guys if I had to choose between the two.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jim. I love reading his articles every week. It's like one of the few. Again, they're one of the few people who have FanDuel data, and so the way that they can contextualize FanDuel slates, absolutely need to go over there and read articles. I love it. Jordan says Elijah Mitchell or James Conner.
I'm big on James Conner this week. I'm not as big on Elijah Mitchell for the reason that JaMychal Hasty's returning, and when Hasty has been active, he's gotten the receiving game work. So that certainly reduces the possibility of Mitchell playing a full role like we've seen the past couple of weeks. So I'll go Conner in that sense. But I mean, certainly there's a possibility Elijah Mitchell just dices up Seattle's defense, but I'll say Conner's a little bit safer.
Makes sense. Yeah. Chris says, if Brian isn't doing the Atlanta stack, you know what to do.
I'm playing the Tampa Bay side for all transparency. I'm playing fully stacking Tampa Bay, just not running back with Atlanta. So,
Ken, what's up, Ken? He says, who are some of your favorite plays outside of game stacks?
So those running backs we mentioned, obviously, without question. Big fan of DK Metcalf this week, underperforming wide receiver, getting the coach speak during the week. I think there was a tight end or two. Let me pull up the model here on my side that I liked. Sorry, just looking here.
Mm-hmm.
I like Kittle a lot this week too. I don't think a lot of people are going to play him on projected ownership. I guess it's 7% on DraftKings. But again, everyone's going to pay down it for Foster Moreau. I think Kittle without Debo has a chance for a big game. So those are probably my favorite plays.
Okay, see that. I was actually going to ask you, Brian, about for running backs. It seems like Cordero Patterson's getting the Duke Johnson from a couple years ago treatment, where he just is really good, and his ownership is always under 10%. We have him projected for 4% on DraftKings, 5% on FanDuel. Do you like him at all outside of a bring back in the stack?
Yeah, I'll play him. I'm playing him for sure. You have to, right, with his dual threat role. So I'm not missing out on a 4 touchdown week. And Patterson will be in my allocations for sure.
Definitely. Ed says, who's the best worst play and who's the worst good play?
The worst good play is Madison for sure. I think that's, to me, that's clear. I think with the elevated price, the potential for Nwangwu to get more reps, blowout potential, his efficiency questions, Madison's that is. So I think he's the worst best play, and the best worst play. Oh man, there's a lot of those. Best worst play is probably one of these receivers, and probably Zay Jones. I'll say Zay Jones. We like the game stack. He's underperforming, playing a good amount of snaps. against a secondary that's just known to give up massive plays. So I'll say Zay Jones for that answer.
Nice. And who's going to break the slate? And it's definitely going to be Sonny Michel, right?
I'll let you guys know at 12:50 when I X out the final running back for my allocation, and it will be that player. Right now, it's looking like Saquon Barkley.
We just all need push notifications, like Occupy push notifications. Like Brian X'd out Joe Mixon. It's like, all right, lock button him.
Yeah. For real though, it's gonna be Saquon this week, so that's your answer.
Chris points out, Kyle Pitts is an underperforming wide receiver, tight end, so don't forget to put him in.
Yep.
Ed says, yeah, he's playing the Gone Vikings defense this week. If it don't, he'll run 2 back and run 2 in for 8 yards.
The ultimate stat line.
You've talked about him for a lot. I mean, that's why we have multiple lineups. You can just put one lineup in like that and be good.
Ed, if you take down the GPP with you get if you take down a GPP with him in your lineup, you get lifetime Occupy Fantasy member access.
Don't tempt him with that. Now he's gonna do 150. That's just gonna be his core. He's just gonna lock in him and Vikings defense.
That'd be so sick.
Yeah. Underperforming wide receiver looks solid this week. Rager scares me with Hurts questionable.
Here's the thing. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they go a little bit more pass heavy with Gardner Minshew under center. Maybe Rager can connect better with Minshew because clearly he's an underperforming wide receiver because he hasn't connected with Hurts. So I don't think it's that. If it was some like super scrub quarterback, then yeah, I would be a little concerned. But this is a guy who's facilitated fantasy scoring before, so regardless who starts, I think Rager's a great cheap option, and that's probably the answer to the best worst play.
Okay. Nice. Cool. So 2 minutes left, Brian. Any last lingering thoughts you want to talk about, or anything we missed?
Again, so if you're watching this replay, we're recording this 2:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. We don't have official word on Darrell Henderson. All of our experience is telling us that this is a week that Henderson sits out. We get lock button Sonny Michel and play him heavily. Take advantage of all the cheap running backs. I think because of that and some of these cheap running backs, this is definitely a week where you can flex a running back in high risk contests. We've seen receivers be more likely to be optimal this year. I think it's a week for running backs. And I think the game stacks are pretty clear. It's one of those weeks that everything's lining up. Will we get a spike week? Fingers crossed. Let's hope so. But I will say it looks like a very, very good week.
Yeah, let's definitely hope so. Abel says Lamar has a major upside running, but he also is developing a passing game. What's your thoughts on Marquise Brown?
I mean, he's top 10 in our model. Marquise, aside from a couple games, has I think he's put up 70+ yards and/or a touchdown in like 18 of his last 20 games or something ridiculous. So he obviously has a rapport with Lamar, and we like him in all contest types.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, and then other thing, completely unrelated to NFL. Make sure you go ahead and root for Lucas today. He has 3 tickets in the college world championship. There is chaos because if I can go to that tab, an 87% player has a half a point.
Oh shit, that's true chaos.
Yeah. And then for that game stack one, I guess that's Kent State's side. I don't even know if it's Kent State. Yeah, Kent State. The running back, 87% owned, has a half a point, and then the quarterback, 75% owned, just got a touchdown now, so he's at 13 points, which can definitely be beatable.
Yeah, and I'm looking here. Lucas has one lineup that has nobody started yet. So with like literally 75% of the field with snowflakes, Lucas's final lineup here has a great shot. So I'm curious to see as these players are revealed who he's got and who we need to be rooting for.
Absolutely, yeah. He texted me this morning. He says it's going to be a 12-hour sweat. And I said, I told him, I said I'd rather have that kind of sweat than no sweat.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Definitely. Well, just to plug everything, again, there is the daily plug that you see here on screen, OccupyFantasy.com. We also have the Occupy models up for NFL. Always check out the Discord as well, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Get in with an access to an Occupy Fantasy subscription. Or if you hit the join button here on YouTube, you can get access to Discord. We also have like other random sports happening, like MMA. Again, there's still the late college football, some CS:GO coming on as well. All those are very active. Yeah, plug models. Go ahead and go check them out. We'll be here live next time on Tuesday, where we break down Brian's 150 lines from the previous week. Chris will be live tomorrow on Twitter Live. where he breaks down your final Q&A thoughts. Make sure you check that out on mobile because there's no like chat option on desktop. Sucks. And last question before I take us out of here: wide receiver or running back and flex this week? Which way would you lean in 20 max? I think Brian, you said running back.
I do, and usually that answer is receiver, pretty simply. But I think this week with all the running back value and not a ton of great receiver plays, I'll say a running back is in the optimal lineup this week.
I would hope so. You have to play at least 2.
I'll rephrase that and say a running back will be optimal in the flex position.
Nice, because it's going to be Sonny Michel.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Until next time, fellas and gals, I am Moose, and alongside Brian from OccupyFantasy.com. Have a good one.